One of my least favorite things about motivational speakers, you go to a motivational speaker and you get all psyched and pumped because they're awesome and they're a great speaker and they show all these cool things and you're like, yes, you leave, you're like, I can do this. This is awesome. And then you go, I have no idea how to do all that awesome stuff. And then there's no follow-up. And then a week later you go, well, anybody have another TED Talk I can watch? There's not the follow-through. Have the event, but make sure there's an equal dedication to what happens afterwards. That's what makes learning sink in and retention happen.
Yeah. Consumption without application is just consumption.
Right.
Consumption with application is retention.
Yeah. Exactly right.
This episode of Inside the Process is powered by Trainual, the one app that organizes who does what and how. Check it out at trainual.com.
Today is not about us, it's about you. So this is going to be jam-packed. Yeah. Tons of dad jokes coming.
We are right now laying the groundwork for who is going to be leading tomorrow.
This song is such a jam.
Ideas don't build multi-million-dollar businesses. It's the implementation and execution of those ideas that do.
Self-made can lead to self-destruction. You are successful at what you give attention to.
This is why I was created. This is why I was made. I was made to do this.
It's about how to build your playbook.
That was such an incredible session.
Welcome to another episode of Inside the Process, the real-time podcast where we're serving you with practical, actionable frameworks, guidance, tips, tricks, hacks, you name it, to help you operationalize, nurture, and scale your business and your teams, and hopefully, at least I think so, become an all-around better human being.
Yeah, and the way we do that is by bringing on to this show some of the best minds, the thought leaders, to share and discuss their insights and strategies on how to do all the things that Mallory just talked about. And you get to be part of that. We love to have your insights. We want to hear from you. That's why the chat is there. So feel free to reach out whenever you've got questions or want to share something. Pop it into the chat. You can raise your hand as well. And we could call on you to just share. Definitely want you to be part of this process as we go through today.
Awesome. Well, I'm Mallory, one of your hosts, a 10-year systems and ops veteran turned marketer. And I'm here with Shawn, the super awesome training and dev guy.
And we are your operations and training super duo and your hosts for Inside the Process. So welcome everybody again. So glad that you're here. We're excited for this show today.
Absolutely. All right. So I feel like I need to just set the scene and have you visualize something for us here real quick. So maybe it's the start of the year, or it's you starting a new job, or you need to refresh your knowledge on a process or a policy, and you sit down at your computer to complete the training. And as you're clicking through, your eyes just kind of glaze over. It's walls of text. It's no personality. It's boring, snooze-worthy content that just kind of stinks to go through. You start just rapid fire clicking to the end of it and you realize, oh my gosh, I just wasted 30 minutes and I didn't learn a darn thing. Well, not on Shawn's watch. That's right. Today's guest is our very own normal co-host, Shawn Jensen, to teach us all about making training fun and retainable. Retention. Shawn is an Arizona native where he resides with his wife, 3 kids, and dog, Molly. Molly can probably hear me right now saying her name. She's like, what are you doing? Yes. Shawn's been a lover of all things training, coaching, and mentoring since his first job at Wendy's in high school. When we were prepping for this, I told him that my first job was working at Burger King when I was 16. So I would love for you guys to pop in your first jobs. I think they're always so interesting. Pop those into the chat. Initially, Shawn had his eyes and heart set on art and even illustrated a number of children's books before making a pivot to a career in training and development. So see the tie-in here, arts and training and development, good training, fun training. I'm going somewhere with this. He's spent over 20 years teaching kids and adults in both face-to-face and online forums. His greatest work passion is creating opportunities where people can learn and have fun doing it. So, welcome to the hot seat, Shawn.
Yay, thank you so much. It's so fun to like pop over to this side of the thing and experience this. So hopefully share some good information with everybody today.
We're really excited for it. So you're kind of known around here for being energetic and fun and just kind of being that lovable training guy. And I think we hear this internally and externally from our customers. And so I'm curious, what inspired you to channel that into better learning for others?
So as you mentioned in the bio there, I've always gravitated towards anything that's training, development, coaching, mentoring related. It's always been something that's been passion for me. I really I started training people many years ago, and I came to a previous employment, and it was during the onboarding stage, and I was going to be a trainer. I was going to go out across the nation and train teachers on how to use a learning management system and curriculum. And I was really pumped about this experience. And so I went in for my first week of training, and I sat down with one of the senior trainers, and she proceeded to walk me through the software program that I would eventually be training to with our customers. And this is what the setting was. We sat in this little room, and there was this box monitor right over here on this side, and a keyboard, and the tower over there, and 2 chairs. And I sat here, and she sat right there. And then she proceeded to walk me through every single tab and function and feature in that software program over the course of 6 hours that day. And my brain exploded, at like an hour and 10 minutes. Okay. And because it was just like me watching her do this whole thing the whole time. And I was just bored to tears. And when we got done, I remember we walked out of the room, and I looked over at her and I said, "Hey, I've got a question for you." And I said, "Is this how we train our customers?" And she says, "Yeah, I just ran you through the exact training that we use for our customers." And in my head, I screamed again. I was like, "No, we can't." But it was this moment where me as the learner, experiencing a thing that I was going to be training someone on here in the near future, I went, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to train people, because this did not hit the mark for me as a learner, right? So from that point on, I got really into how to build effective training. I really got into some elements of instructional design and kind of observing how things work for people, observing people as they're being trained, and that provided a lot of insight. So that was the door that got open, and I got kicked right on through because it was so poignant how terrible that style of training was, and I wanted to make it better.
That's amazing. I love that. Open the door and kicked on through. I feel like half my career has been that. People are like, "How did you get into what you're into?" And I'm like, "It found me." I don't know what to tell you. That's amazing. Well, I can say from personal experience that folks applaud you around here, not only for your face-to-face training, but also for your documented training, like the stuff that you're putting out in Trainual University, which I'm sure lots of people here have done Trainual U, right? And everyone knows that your content is pretty incredible, and it's fun, and it's engaging, and it's a reflection of your personality. So I think my first question for you is, what do you think are some keys to designing effective training that people actually enjoy and remember?
Yeah, so I think there's 3 keys that I'm thinking of top of mind. The very first one, this is probably the most important. If you don't nail this, you're not going to have effective training at all, and that is knowing your audience. You need to know who you are training. You need to know who the people are in the room. You need to know what their likes are. You need to know what their needs are. You need to know enough about them that you know what they value in their positions, their roles, whatever they do. You also need to know what their capacity is. And that's a really important one when it comes to building out effective training, is knowing that we are human beings and we have certain limits of capacity in terms of how much information we can take in and how much we can retain, right? So that's another thing. You need to really know who your audience is. That's the first place to start. And, again, if that's talking with our supervisors, if that's talking with them and generally before trainings happen, so you can get a feel for what the needs are going to be there. A second key, and I'm a big believer in this one, is being authentic, right? You need to infuse yourself into the training that you are providing to your team members. And whether this is face-to-face or you're creating an online training, you're going to do something via Zoom, or even in a more of a asynchronous, like I'm doing this on the computer, self-paced, you can infuse as much as yourself into that as you possibly can, because that shines through and it becomes more real and natural for people when they're receiving that content. If I try to be someone I'm not, it doesn't work. Okay. I am not quiet. I am not, reserved, and that works for me. And so I'm able to, I bring that out. Right. The third key that I'd bring up is you need to have a proven framework that you use for designing training, not just, hey, I opened up a PowerPoint deck and I just started writing and putting stuff on there. Okay. That's how, unfortunately, a lot of trainings do get started that way. So it's important that you have a proven framework. Now, you don't have to be an instructional design geek or like have gone to school for that to do this effectively. There are a really simple framework. In fact, I'll share one momentarily here that I use on a regular basis, and you'll see it's really, really simple. In fact, is that cool if I bring that up right now, Mallory? Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, cool. So when you are setting out to design effective training, this is where it starts, okay, is purpose and targets. Now, there's different words for that. Purpose is the rationale, it's the reason for the existence of the training. And then the targets are the clear and measurable outcomes that someone should be able to do by the time they're done training. You need to identify these early on. Like, this is the first thing you identify. Why are we doing this? Why do we need our people to do this? What's the value to them? What value is this going to bring to them in their day-to-day work, right? And then from there, you identify what the clear and measurable outcomes are. What should they be able to do when they're done? The line item, clear things that you can actually measure, okay? Like, you need to be able to describe the 5-step process for setting up the printer, okay? That is really clear and really measurable. Once you have nailed those down, you know what those are, then here's the framework and what the elements that need to be part of this. And this is how I build every single training that I do, whether, again, it's online or if it's self-paced, something in Trainual that someone's walking through. I use these 4 elements. Instruction, which is teaching. It's someone teaching important information, skills, other kind of concepts that people need to understand. Examples. So this is an extension of the instruction is, hey, this is what this looks like, right? This is how you can visualize this. Because if we don't provide examples, whether they are visual or conceptual, then everything, it just remains more, theoretical, right? We need to be able to see how this actually applies in real life, which then stems to application. We need to have the opportunity as learners to actually apply the things that we are learning, right? Otherwise, again, we can't sink our teeth into it enough. And finally, you need to have assessment in some way, shape, or form, right? You need to be able to identify, hey, are these people learning this? Are they retaining it? Are they able to actually apply this after the fact, right? So you want to make sure you are doing some kind of assessment. We can talk about different types of assessment, but those 4 elements, instruction, examples, application, and assessment, are absolutely it should be part of anything that you call a training, okay? And we talked about knowing your audience. So I'll touch on this real quickly, and that is, the way you use these different elements is you need to balance them out for the audience, right? So the way I would train a group of engineers is going to be very different than the way I train a group of, customer experience people, right? Because there's different likes, there's different needs there. So I may have more application activities for CX, more fun activities for CX, where I may have a little bit more direct instruction for engineers, if that's what the needs are. So you're balancing that for the audience, but each of those 4 elements will always tie back to the purpose and the targets. Okay. So that's kind of, again, to answer your first question there, kind of the keys that I look for when building out training.
I love it. So I share content on LinkedIn, which you obviously know, but they might not know. And I say sometimes that I think sharing content on LinkedIn is how I landed in marketing after working in operations so many years. And one of the very first things I learned in sharing content on LinkedIn and building the audience that you're talking about is that hook. And so what you're going over right now feels like it's very much the meat of the thing, right? But like, how do you get people to even buy into it and start, the training? What types of training activities or delivery methods have you found spark the most participation and get employees immediately excited and actively involved in completing training?
Yeah. So I think my biggest tool is interaction. I want people to interact with me. If I'm the trainer, if I'm live, I want them to interact with the content. If I'm not live with them, they're working in a tool, a module of some kind, an online module, Trainual or something like that. I want them to be able to interact as early as possible. And that could be as simple as like what we did at the very beginning of this session, right? We started asking people, we asked you like, hey, where are you from? Tell us a little about yourself. What's your industry? I'm getting to know you a little bit so I can, I'm able to read the room a little bit more in terms of what I share and how I share it, right? So that's a big one I love to do. I get people involved doing things early and frequently. So those of you who've been through, Trainual University content, you're doing things very, very soon after you start doing that content, whether it's watching a video or actually doing some kind of an activity. That is crucial. One of the worst things you can do in a training is talk at people forever. Okay. You will not get the engagement. And I think we need to think about engagement in terms of a direct correlation to retention. When someone is engaged in content and when they're engaged in whatever they're seeing on the screen, if they're engaged in what's being said and shared with them, then they retain that naturally much longer because it's important, it's valuable to them. They see the value in it. So that's the first thing. Gamification is one. I mean, I'm a big fan of play. I like to have a competition. I like to have activities. I like to do things that are fun. Challenges. I love badges. I love certificates. All those things go a long way. The real key, of course, is that when you have those activities, and this is where I actually see a lot of like disconnect, where sometimes we'll have a fun activity, but I'm left wondering, how did that tie back to what we were doing? Was that just a fun thing we just did? We want to make sure that the activities that we're having people do are tying directly back. Remember those targets I was talking about, those clear and measurable outcomes? If the activities help someone to achieve those targets, that's valuable. So that's another piece there that we can talk a little bit further about, but you want to make sure that the content is relevant, okay? And the activities that you do, the gamification is relevant. I think another one that I'll call out as well as, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, we're humans. Surprise, we're all humans. We're not low-level robots, okay? So we need breaks. And I know it's kind of fun it's kind of interesting to bring up like breaks as a thing, but we need brain breaks. A brain break is a time to get up and walk away from the instruction for a little bit, to take a breather, to do something that is maybe not directly related to the content itself. It's go on a walk with someone and just kind of get to know them a little bit, right? Get to know someone you're working with. If you're online, it means, hey, a very intentional, okay, stop right now. and go do something else for 10 minutes and then come back here, right? And continue with your online work. That way you're giving the human brain time to refresh, to decompress a little bit and refresh. And a refreshed brain is going to engage quicker and better than if they're just a tired brain. So a few things there that I'd suggest.
Totally agree. Those like 4-hour, quarterly planning or annual planning meetings or team meetings, that you have once a year and it's 4 hours, like that 15 minutes or 20 minutes in the middle of those 4-hour segments is like key. Like I get energy, you can get up and walk around. I'm engaged again. I'm not like, nodding and falling asleep because sometimes it's just a matter of your brain just being in that lull state for so long. And it's not that the content's not engaging. It's just that, it can become tiresome just to sit there for so long and listen.
That is such a great point. I love that you just said that because you're right. I mean, it could be perfectly engaging, but we're human. We need to stop after a while, right? So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. So Carmela's saying that she does a lot of her trainings on Zoom, and she's curious how much graphics and good visuals play into really getting people involved if you're doing trainings in that manner.
Yeah, I love that. So we've got different learning preferences out there. We've got people who are more textual, like my wife, Monica. She can read any block of text and she's good. She doesn't need anything else, right? And then there's people like me who are like, no, I need a picture. Okay, show me a thing. Make something pop out on the screen at me a little bit, right? So a balance is what you're striking for there, Carmela. You want to make sure, yes, visuals are powerful. Visuals are, you heard the term, a picture's worth 1,000 words, okay? Videos are worth 60,000, okay? But there are limits there as well. If it's all video, if it's all visuals, if it's all just a PowerPoint presentation, you're going to lose some people after a while. So have a good, healthy balance between the visuals and just the face-to-face instructional, the text that you need to read. The best way to identify what that balance needs to be, again, as we mentioned at the beginning, is knowing your audience, knowing what their capacities are, and building the training specifically for that.
Yeah. Maybe we think of like end of training surveys can be really helpful too.
Yeah, 100%. We'll talk a little bit about those, I think, a little bit later on. But yeah, I love the end of survey. One of the questions let's talk about it right now, because I love it. At the end of a training, I like to have a little end of session survey, not long, but there is one question that I absolutely want to gather from them that will let me know if the training began putting them down the right path. And that question is, what did you learn that you can apply today? What did you learn that you can apply today? I always ask that as an open-ended question because that allows my learners to maybe think a little bit more critically about what they learned and be able to respond to that. Well, I learned this, and this is how I can apply it right now. That's a great question to ask at the end of training survey. Love that.
Awesome. What add-ons do you recommend for including interaction or gamification in training content?
Yeah, okay, I love this, and there are so many. You can spend way too much time online finding great tools. I love Quizlets. I love Kahoots. These are tools that allow a little bit more fun interaction when it comes time for quizzing and you just kind of those fun activities that people can respond to where it's not high stakes, like I'm going to give you a grade, you're going to fail this if you don't get it right. They're just opportunities to play. I love the use of video. So I will say, hey, now that we've talked about this, I want you to go record a video of yourself doing this little thing and then share it in the Slack channel. Or share it with a couple of your team members, share it with your manager so they can get a feel for how you have accomplished this. We can have a lot of fun with that as well. We can talk more about some fun later as well. But video content is something I'm really big on, not just that I'm giving to them, but that they can respond and interact with in terms of that as well. They can do video. All right.
Another thing I'll say in that same vein, and this is probably really simple and it's not a genius idea by any measure, but I started out as a Trainual customer before I joined the team, and I was primarily responsible for training, but also adoption of the Trainual platform and making sure that people were actually taking the trainings and then reading the processes that we put into the system. And one of the things that we did was we pulled a drawing once a month, whether it was for $50 or $100, like a gift card. Anybody who was at 100% could win a $100 gift card. We just drew one for the end of the month. So, I mean, that's something you could do. I guess the only caveat there is like some people are like, what if I get assigned something on the last day? Like you have to, be smart about it and pull reports and things like that. But that is like something super simple that you can do. And there's also like, more complex things like point systems and stuff that you can get competitive with. The other thing too is not just process and training completion, but also creation. So we would get really creative with the number of processes that people created, and award different prizes based on that. We actually had a parking spot, this coveted like front row parking spot that people would compete for. And also people just love swag. Like, can I just say that? People go nuts.
Who loves swag? I don't know anyone who loves swag.
Yeah, right. People love swag. So I feel like there's a lot of things you can do to just do like, random drawings and for prizes and things like that too. Hopefully that's not an simple idea, but it's one that came to mind. So,
and I love what you just said. Usually the simplest ideas are the best. I've seen people go to really complicated lengths to create some kind of a fun activity or competition that was way too overdone, and it fell flat, or it was fun, but they could have done been just as successful with something that was a lot more simple. Everyone loves competition. Most people like competition. Some people don't, but most people like some kind of loose competition that you can have some fun with. So yeah, I'm a big believer in games. There's some great Jeopardy games you can add you can use those live. You can embed those into Trainual. So there's all kinds of things. Look for embeddable training, embeddable activities. Okay, just do a Google search for embeddable activities. There'll be thousands out there, and you can try those out and see what works best for your own teams.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say in that vein is just know that it's totally on our radar and something that we're always thinking about.
Yeah.
So we've definitely got that in our minds. Okay, so Dan also asked, do you build suggested breaks into topics or steps? So I'm assuming like he's not talking about, training like this, but really like digital training. Do you expect them to know when they need to stop and take a break, or are you giving them reminders?
That's a great question. I think it's a good idea when you are building out your content. Again, that I'm gonna go back to those purpose and targets. That should help you to get a feel for what overall needs to be part of that training. And there's a certain amount of time that you can gauge that, okay, at this point we will have covered all these things. Maybe this is a point for a break. And yeah, Dan, it'd be very intentional. I'll put a step in there that says, okay, go take a break now, right? Take a 10-minute break, go do something else for a little while before you come back. That's literally a step that they have to mark complete in the training. Okay. That would be a great idea to do. Again, part of the intentionality of building out content, and one of the things I love about Trainual is that you can build it into the smallest components that you need. That's, for those of you who've done Trainual University, that's why we didn't put it into one huge training. It's 3 separate sessions or 3 separate modules. And that is intentional so that we're not overloading someone, and there's this natural breaking point at the end. So yeah, it's a good call out, Dan. Depending on what that training covers, you may want to put those right in the steps, right inside like a call out to go take a break now. Yeah. And I loved the other question you asked, Dan. What did you not learn today? Right. So what did you learn that you can apply today? What did you learn? What did you not learn today? That would give you some really good information.
Yeah. Like, what were you hoping to learn that were the gaps in the training?
Nice. Look at Charles. His first job, 13 to 16 years old, line boy, gassing, cleaning general aviation aircraft at Freeway Airport. That's so cool.
This is super cool. Okay, last question. And I think this really makes sense in this vein. So I'm going to ask it to you before we move on. Considering the different styles of learning, right? I feel like in elementary school, we all learned about like visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning. how could we introduce more kinesthetic components into training and learning?
Yeah. So again, a lot of this is going to depend on the venue, and the where training is happening. If it's like live in place, I'll share something I did that helped with this. But if it's online, if someone's working through something self-paced, how do you do kinesthetic learning when you are literally looking at a screen, right? I'm a big believer in having people practice. Remember, I showed you earlier that framework, and the third option, the third thing in their third element was application. So I'm a big fan of saying, all right, I've taught you the process for how to do this step. That is a tangible thing. I've got to actually go do this. Now add a new step, add some kind of element that says, okay, now go do this. The steps. Now go do that actual thing. Maybe that's go work with a supervisor to help you, monitor how you're setting up the printer or whatever that may be. But actually having them do the thing that you taught them how to do is really crucial, not only for the kinesthetics of it, but just learning in general. We learn through muscle memory, right? Everyone does that, whether they feel like they're more kinesthetic or more visual. We all learn by doing. Right. So as much as you're able to infuse that into your training content, what I'll suggest is as you build out, I'm going to talk specifically about Trainual here. If you're building out a topic of content and you've got all of your steps within that topic of content, look at those steps and ask yourself this question: how could I have them apply this? How can I have them actually go and do this? And literally create a step that is called activity that says, go do this thing that they have to mark complete. Okay. That's something that I might do as frequently as I possibly could, as long as it is intentional. Again, it should tie back to those targets we talked about at the beginning. Okay. That makes sure that it's intentional. And as often as you're able to do that, that's going to help those learners to really super apply the kinesthetic part of what they're learning. Okay. I share this as well in a classroom setting. And again, I was teaching a group of teachers how to use a software program. There's not a lot of like, get up and go do this stuff. It's really like you're doing it right there on the computer. But I did notice this in a group of 30 people. I've got, again, different learning preferences. I've got some people that are super, like focused and they're just like this. Right. And then I've got people that are like this. They're looking around everywhere. I know what they need. They need something for their hands to do. So what I would do, and I wish I had one right now, but I'll just pretend this is it. But I'd go to Walmart and I'd get they've got these little spiky balls that glow if you like agitate them or bounce them a little bit. And they're like $1, right? And I got one and gave one to every single one of the teachers in the room. And that was just this little thing that they could do this with. They could bounce it. And it was really funny because some people would take a look at it and go, huh, and then set it down and not touch it again till the end of the training. And they'd pick it up and probably give it to their daughter or something like that, right? But then I had other people that were like this constantly the entire time. And I'd given them something to channel that agitated energy, and they were more focused on the content at hand and what we were doing. So there's the aspect of, again, providing opportunities for people to apply and do those tangible things, but also when there's less tangible things to actually do, still being aware that that is a thing that people need as part of their learning process. So being aware, again, reading the room and providing opportunities for them to stretch those muscles as well. So a couple thoughts there.
We did a people manager training recently with Sasha, and she gave everybody a whiteboard and a couple of, different colored markers and things. And there were prompts that she would give us prior to whatever the section of content was that she was going to go over. So for example, she would say like, what is your number one fear about going into people leadership? And, we would write it on the board, and then everybody would just kind of, hold it close to the vest, pun intended, and then, turn it around. And it's a little bit of a vulnerable exercise with trusted other, people managers or people going into people management. And they would show like what their number one fear was. And then at the end of it, after she, went through several things, it's like, what are you most excited about now that you've got this training? And now that we know you're heading into this new responsibility, what are you most excited about? Like, what do you think your strengths are going into this? And she would have us write it on the whiteboard and then show it to everyone. And it got me thinking about how you could totally do something like that in Trainual or in whatever content platform that you're in. You could do a pre-test and say, like, use a picture or a GIF or a word to describe how you're feeling right now before entering this training, or make the question related to whatever the training is, and then do a post test. Like, what are you most excited about now? Or use a picture or a GIF to describe like how you're feeling now about going into people management or customer service or sales or whatever it is. So that was just like a really cool example that I wanted to share. And then the other thing too that I did in a past life is video responses. So I was responsible. One of the first things I had to do was train our onboarding team and train our sales team. And so I wrote all the content for them, and I had to do a lot of role playing with them. And it's really hard to do role play, I think, in traditional PowerPoints or Word documents. Is almost impossible. But you can absolutely do things like that inside of Trainual, where you're creating a test question as an activity and saying, respond with an email de-escalating this situation, and give them the situation and make them write an email of how they would respond to that, de-escalating the situation. Or a video response, like, hey, you're on a phone call. Here's an objection you got to moving forward with Trainual. How would you respond to this objection? I want you to record the video like you're on the phone with me. And people would have to respond with a video link. Another thing, one more example, is I did a lot of training with our payroll and HR teams, even our benefits teams, and they were just very systems heavy, very compliance systems heavy. And if you know, it is something where you've got to be like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 certified, and you can never touch anything in level 3 if you've not accomplished level 1 and level 2. And we would have them do a lot of activities and respond with screenshots in the test. Like, there is a specific way that your screen should look if you've done this correctly. I'm not going to tell you what it's supposed to look like. I need to see your screen when you're done. Send me that screenshot. And it was a really good way to know if people did what they were supposed to do correctly. You could do that with Excel sheets. You could do that with a lot of different things. So long-winded answer, but all of these have been very successful in my time.
There was so much fun in that. Okay. And I think fun is an interesting word, because when we think of fun, we think, oh, like we have clowns and balloons and, it's all this like fun music and everything. That's not necessarily what fun is. Fun is engagement, right? Fun is getting people doing things that are relevant and they enjoy doing it. That's fun, right? I love the video response. I mentioned that earlier. I love the use of video. I think that's a great way to provide, again, to show what we know is through video, us actually doing it. The other thing that I heard you say, and I absolutely loved it, and I would echo this for everybody here, is when you have an activity where someone's going to be able to do something and apply, a great thing to do is to give them options for how they respond, right? Or how they do that activity. Because you know what? Not everyone's going to be like, yay, video. I love that, right? I love that you said they could either write it up in an email, or they could do a video, or maybe they just work with someone directly and just do it face to face. Okay. Maybe you give those options. Hey, you're going to do this activity now. Here are some ways you can complete this. It's a great way to, again, address that there's multiple learning preferences in the room, different styles that people that attach to, and you're addressing that and being conscious of that. So I love those examples right there.
All right. I think that takes us through all of the questions that we had in the chat. So the next question that I have for you is, have you found any tricks or best practices for overcoming training resistance? So we've made the training super fun. In our opinion, we think we've done a stellar job, but we still have, whether it be legacy people or just people in general who say, you know what, I just don't have time for this. My bandwidth won't allow it. Whatever the excuses that we've all heard for, I just am not going to complete this training, and you hear the resistance. How do you overcome that?
Yeah, it's an important challenge to be able to overcome. The one thing you have to be conscious of as a trainer, as a training designer, is that most people come to a training with preconceived notions about what that training is going to be. And unfortunately, we have a lot of training baggage out there. A lot of people have been to really crappy trainings in the past. And so they're bringing that with them. And there's certain expectations of what's going to happen in that training. So my goal for that specifically is I want them to have an experience that they did not expect, right? I want them to be able to come to something, to a training session, and actually have had a really enjoyable time doing it. And all that comes down to, again, how it's designed, how it's laid out, what you're having them do. And for simplicity's sake, that I didn't talk at them the whole time and that's what they were expecting, right? That's one thing to be considering. The second thing, if you want to get people on board, regardless of whether they are brand new or old, they've been around there for a long time, they're OG, then you have to help them very early on to understand the value of that training. And that we don't spend enough time on this. There's a lot of trainings where we start the training, we just go right into it. And we don't spend enough time on explaining and helping people understand the why behind this. Because when someone understands the why and they understand why something is relevant to them, there's a natural, intrinsic desire to do that thing. Oh, I can see why this is valuable to me. Okay. And I want to engage with that. The add-on to that is if they know exactly what they're being held accountable for learning, that also increases their natural engagement, because someone who knows why they're doing a thing and the value it's going to bring to them, and they know exactly what they're being held accountable for learning, they naturally want to engage. All right. Now, if this is a consistent issue where people are going to come to training going, wow, and they're like that throughout, it's probably not a them thing. Okay. It's we need to evaluate how this training is designed. We need to evaluate how it's being delivered, because if a lot of people are experiencing this way, then it's probably not them. Surveys are a great way to do this, to get the litmus test. If you are not surveying after each training session that you do, you're losing really valuable insights into the value of that content, right? So those are a couple of things that I wanted to kind of bring up there. Hopefully that answers the question there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Dan called out something that's really important too. He said senior management must constantly stress that training is a good thing and there will be no penalty for the time invested. I would take this a step further and actually say that it's your responsibility as a manager or a people leader to make sure that their bandwidth allows for the time to take the training and to help them prioritize training and deprioritize other things to make room for training. And then also he said to stress the value to the employee rather than to the company.
100%. You nailed it, Dan. I mean, again, we're selfish people sometimes. We just really are. If we don't see the value in a thing, we don't really want to engage with it. So if I can't see why it helps me, I care about Trainual. I really care about Trainual a lot. But when I get trained, if it's not going to help me be better in my role within Trainual, then it's not as valuable. Does that make sense? So that's a really crucial thing to be thinking about. And the other thing I want to touch on based on what you just said there is we very often, another thing we do way too frequently is we treat trainings and training in general like events, right? Like, okay, we're going to have a training on this thing. We go, we teach, we do things, we assess, then we get done. Okay, we're done, right? No, we're not done. We actually just barely started the process, because learning and training is an ongoing process. So what you've got to do is ensure that the assessment and the application continues after the event, okay? That's how you ensure the value. That's how you ensure that retention is actually happening. If you do a training and you don't talk about it anymore, it's not part of your regular cycle of feedback, of one-on-ones, of evaluations. If that's not part of it, then you're doing yourself and your team members a great disservice by not helping them to further their knowledge and retention of those training events that you provide to them. So really great point there. How do you carry that on past just the training event itself?
Dan's heard me get on my soapbox so many times. You probably have too, honestly, Shawn. But I get on this whole rant of like, what you deem a benefit as the company or even as a leader is often not what your employee deems a benefit. So if you're talking about, people retention and scalability and profitability, and it's going to help our bottom line, your employees are like, okay, cool for you. Like, how does that affect me? You need to be talking about things that are important to them, like maybe you give a free PTO day in one of your drawings that you do, or maybe you talk very openly about how, hey, if we are able to reduce errors by making sure that we are doing our payroll compliance correctly or our benefits compliance correctly, and we save on all this money that we're bleeding when we do audits and we get all these fees and fines or what have you. Obviously, this is a very specific example that I've experienced in past life. We'd be able to take that money and put it back into employee incentive programs or company retreat or what have you. Like, be very honest about how taking the training and making sure that you're doing the right things is going to help the employee. Oh, I love that, Dan. Yeah, less stress for the employee, increased promotions, new skills gained, growing in your personal career. Those are the things that your employees want to hear, not necessarily how the company is going to benefit, even though we usually, love the companies that we work for.
Yeah, so. I love when I see training that is tied directly to employee performance. Things like, hey, you completed this many trainings this quarter, and you applied that learning. It's demonstrable that you've applied this in your work. That impact was this, right? Let's give incentives. Let's give rewards. Let's give raises. Let's give praises, right? Let's do those things and gamify. That's why I love badging. When you get into the mode of like providing ongoing training and development for your team members, throw some badging in there. So they're adding these badges. That's gamification. Everyone loves that. Like, look, I got these 6 badges. That's awesome. And these led to this in the company, and I got a raise for it, right? That's powerful stuff. And that creates that awesome engagement and motivation for your team members to learn more down the road, right?
Yeah. I love that you said demonstrable, which is honestly such a fun word to say. It is, right? But it takes me into a good question for you, which is, what are some ways that you can make training really sink in so that they're not only learning and retaining the knowledge, but the behavior on the other side is changing on the job?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to a couple points I mentioned a few moments ago, because I really want to emphasize how important it is that, you're going to have the training moment or event or module that someone's going to do. And that's where they're going to get maybe the bulk of the instruction and the examples, and they'll do some application and probably a little bit of assessment in that event. But if you really want that to sink in, it's got to carry on past the event, right? So I'm talking about, hey, this event was on this date, or that you completed this module on this date. We're going to meet a week later, and we're going to talk about what you've learned, what you've applied from that training event or that module. Okay, that's an intentional thing we're going to talk about in our one-on-one together. Okay, and then it doesn't become this like, one of my least favorite things about motivational speakers. You go to a motivational speaker and you get all psyched and pumped because they're awesome and they're a great speaker and they show all these cool things, and you're like, yes, you leave, you're like, I can do this. This is awesome. And then you go, I have no idea how to do all that awesome stuff. And then there is no follow-up. And then a week later, you go, what? Anybody have another TED Talk I can watch? There's there's not the follow through. So there absolutely must be follow through after the event. 1 week after, a month after, 6 months after. How are we doing on these things? Look at all these badges you've learned. What's the impact on what you've accomplished? We need to have that be that part is as important as the instruction itself. But I will tell you what. that is the part that gets dropped most often and so frequently, too much. Okay. So have the event, but make sure there's an equal dedication to what happens afterwards. That's what makes learning sink in and retention happen.
Yeah. Consumption without application is just consumption.
Right.
Consumption with application is retention.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, are there KPIs for training? 100%. Right?
I swear, sometimes Dan, I feel like has like inside access to like the questions we're going to talk about because like he knows where we're going with this. So Dan, yes, we are going towards measurements of training retention. So Shawn, how do you typically measure whether your training methods and the activities are actually improving knowledge and skills retained? And do you measure before and after, or have other ways that you're quantifying the impact that you're making?
Yeah. So again, this is going to vary a lot depending on what type of training it is, right? I mean, we looked at all the different industries that are represented on our call today. The trainings that are happening in all of your different places of business is going to be so wide and so varied, right? So a couple of things that are kind of universal across the board. First of all, and I mentioned this a couple of times, but making sure that you are getting feedback on the survey sessions themselves, right? Whatever training you did, make sure that you're getting feedback. If you're not getting feedback, I mentioned this a minute ago, you are losing out on really valuable data, okay? So you're asking questions like, was this valuable? What did you learn that you can apply today? What did you not learn today? I love that one. How would you rate this? Would you recommend this training to a coworker, right? That kind of starts to give you some of the information into whether this is a valuable training, okay? As a supervisor or a mentor, this happens often as well. Is that you have, the trainer does the training, right? And then the employee leaves the training with the trainer and goes back to their work with their supervisor. And there's a disconnect between the trainer and the supervisor. If some of you are in that position where there's a different person that's doing the training than the person who's supervising the employee, there needs to be a connection there, so that there can be dialogue between like, hey, this is what we observed in the training. Hey, this is what I needed the training to entail. This is what happened in the training. Okay, great. Now I know I can work with the team members on that, on my end, on my front. All right. So the supervisor trainer connection is huge. And if you are this one and the same, that's awesome. But you want to, like we mentioned a few moments ago, the data is, are they applying this? And the real easy way to do the measurement, remember those targets at the beginning that I mentioned at the beginning? If you, at the very beginning of that training, when you identify the clear and measurable outcomes, that's what you're measuring, okay? Those are your KPIs, right? Those are the things that you are identifying, like these are the things they need to be able to do and do effectively. So I'm using those targets after the fact to do the measurement. Again, a week later, we're looking at those targets. Can you do this, this, and this? These were part of the training. Can you do this, this? Where are you on each of these? That's the measurement. And it goes very much on the individual. Now, I can't stress that enough either, because every single person learns slightly different than the other. So that's why the one-on-ones are so important for that long-term retention. And then again, measuring, is this valuable? If people are applying and they're doing well, guess what? Training's pretty solid, okay? But if there's trouble there and there's a wide-scale problem with things not being applied correctly, yeah, find out what's going on with the learners, but definitely go back to the training to make sure that is covering all the bases it needs to be covering.
Okay. Well, we have a little bit less than 10 minutes, probably about 5 minutes left. So I think that's good on the questions from my end. I would love to leave it open to anyone that has any questions about KPIs and tracking training retention, or anything that we discussed today, or maybe didn't discuss today. I will leave the chat open for any other questions, but we just thank you guys so much for hopping on. We had a pretty decent sized crowd today, which is super fun. You guys asked a ton of great questions and I was loving the engagement. So hopefully we'll see you guys again in 1 month for our next Inside the Process. But yeah,
I'm
we'll
share
just hang
this
out.
real quick as we wrap up.
Okay, cool.
'Cause I love this this visual. Speaking of visuals, right? We were talking about visuals a little bit earlier. Here's a visual. It's actually a quote by Julie Dirksen, a learning strategy and design consultant. But learning experiences are like journeys. The end of the journey isn't knowing more, it's doing more, right? This is why we train people, why we teach people things. We want them to be able to do things better, to do things, not just simply know things. Knowing things is hard to measure. Doing things is easily measurable. So make sure that what you're doing in terms of training is helping people to do more. And you can measure that. Like I said, we talked about targets, we talked purpose, we talked about all these different elements to make training stick. Those are the things that are going to help you to really ensure that people can do what they've been taught how to do.
We actually have 2 questions.
Yeah.
We've got a little time, so I'd love for you to dive in here. So the first one is from Alexander. How do you manage and help develop trainings in different departments? Definitely something that's super tricky to do. As the de facto Trainual guru, also been there, we honestly use it as a process library instead of a training and process library. Good distinction. Trying to help our teams make great content, but the buy-in is difficult.
Yeah, okay. There's a few things to unpack there. And Mallory, I'd love to get your insight on this one as well, since you've been there and done that. I'll just start with saying that when you are looking at multiple departments where there are different people doing different things, like if I'm looking at our product engineering department, that's way different than our sales team, right? And building content and trying to establish a maybe like a template for everyone across the board is probably going to end in screaming failure, right? So I would identify champions within those different departments that are the go-tos, right? They are the people that I can trust to provide me insights into what people need to learn. I can go to get the correct information and also get more insights into the audience, right? We were talking about that at the very beginning. My champions are going to be the people who can give me those insights. And then I can craft training that is designed specifically for those intentional groups of people, right? That'd be one thing I would start. And again, find out, test the waters a little bit. I'm a big believer in starting small to go big, right? You don't create a training and build it out and go, okay, this is perfect for everybody. Let's get it out to everybody without testing it. I would get a training to a certain point where it feels like it's natural and good. And then I'd get like 1 or 2 people within the group to review it and provide feedback on it. And then I'd ask them some of those questions that Dan was talking about earlier, right? You know, what's missing here? What do you wish was here that's not, right? What would you add? What did you not like? What did you like, right? Get some of that feedback so you can tweak and then roll out fuller scale. But those are a couple of thoughts I have on that one in there. Mallory, what do you think?
Oh, I already dropped the Change Champion article, like immediately ran for it. I've had so much success with it. It's something that's been near and dear to my heart. It's one of the first things I ever wrote about 10 years ago, and then was so privileged to join the Trainual team and rewrite this article with other incredible leaders 10 years later. So it's stood the test of time for sure. There's a lot of amazing updated information in there on how to establish change champions within your organization. We created an amazing template for them on how to be a change champion, which is pretty cool, and how your leaders can nurture change champions. I mean, we covered it at length, both in the free template that's in there and in the article. So we'd need a whole nother session for me to share my thoughts on this. I highly encourage you to take a look at that link. But change champions can go such a long way. And the other thing I'll say quickly on this is that sometimes there's just not enough opportunity for leadership as much as people are ready for leadership, you just don't have the positions available for somebody to grow into a leadership role. And having them grow into this stepping stone of a champion role can be a really good transition point or just space where they can honor those leadership principles that they're learning without actually being in a leadership role just yet. So that's something that's I think really valuable in cultures. The last question that we'll probably have time for, I saw one more. Okay, I think I answered this one. I was dropping the I love Claude.ai to help us develop those survey questions. So I think that's what that question was about. Let me just see if Dan had a question here. I build training time into employees' schedule, 10% of 2,080 hours per year. It sounds like this is a formula. 1 hour per week, additional 3 hours scheduled per month, and an additional 4 hours scheduled per quarter. It's part of their work life, and I invest in them. Oh, I love that as a leader.
That's so cool.
Investing in your team. Super cool. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. Again, thank you so much for such thought-provoking questions and engagement. It's been so great having you guys. We would love to know how you thought this training/podcast was. Drop your feedback in the comments and definitely take the survey. There'll be a little survey at the end of this. We got to live our principles. We'd love to hear from you. Topics that you'd love to hear for next time, how you thought this went, things that you'd love us to change or keep doing. So we'd love to hear all of it. But thank you so much for sitting in the hot seat today, Shawn. I look forward to having you back as my co-host.
I know, this is fun. Hey, one thing I'm going to ask everyone to do real quick. Email me, Shawn@Trainual.com, SHAWN. I'm phonetic, Shawn@Trainual.com. And tell me what you learned today that you can apply today. I would love to hear from you, Shawn@Trainual.com. Tell me what you learned that you can apply today. Or Dan, tell me what you didn't learn. Thanks, everybody. Great to be here.
All right. Take care, guys.